Have you ever wondered what it feels like when truth itself becomes your enemy? When every word, every breath, every thought you have begins to rewrite reality around you. Stay with me till the end of this video, because what happens next inside the realm of decaying will twist your understanding of sanity, knowledge, and even time itself. The scholar awoke again, though awake meant little in a place where sleep and consciousness no longer obeyed reason. He stood within a city that defied all description, a skyline that melted, reformed, and breathed like a living organism. Buildings rearranged themselves whenever he blinked, staircases folding into the sky and streets slithering like serpents beneath his feet. It was as if the city knew he was watching, as if it was watching him back. At first, he tried to understand. He marked the walls, carved symbols, drew maps. But by the time he turned around, his marks were gone, or worse, they had changed meaning. What was once a circle became an eye. What was once a name became a curse. The city itself seemed to mock him, reshaping every truth he tried to hold onto. He wandered for what felt like days, though time here was only another liar. The sun rose in the west, set underground, and sometimes returned as a second moon. In every shadow, he heard voices, echoes of lectures he once gave, prayers he once mocked, words twisted into riddles. His own knowledge turned against him, becoming an unending labyrinth of contradictions. Then he found others. They were human once, like him, robed figures whose faces blurred with every glance. They called themselves the disciples of change, and they worshipped the city as a living reflection of their God's will. Each of them bore the marks of their devotion, limbs that shimmered like glass, skin that rippled with color, eyes that multiplied with each lie they spoke. They told him that mutation was not corruption, it was ascension. To change was to live. To resist was to die. And yet, he noticed something behind their feverish joy, a quiet madness. They smiled too widely. Their laughter never quite ended. Each of them repeated the same words, as though they were not speaking by choice but by command. They led him to their temple, a vast tower of mirrors that reflected not light, but thought. Every reflection showed him a version of himself that could have been a tyrant, a saint, a fool, a god. The disciples knelt and chanted, "All truths are lies, all lies are paths, all paths lead to the changer." It was there he met the first daemon. It appeared as a robed scholar like himself, its face hidden behind a mask of fire. Its voice was calm, almost kind. It spoke of enlightenment, of freedom from the chains of reason. It told him that decaying was not evil, only misunderstood. He does not destroy, the daemon said, he transforms. Every question you ask is his gift to you. Every answer, his laughter. The scholar's mind fractured. He began to question not only his surroundings but his own identity. Was he still the man who sought knowledge? Or just another piece of a story being rewritten by something greater? He tried to remember his home, his name, his face, but those memories slipped away like ink in water. The daemon guided him to a great library at the heart of the city, a place where books screamed and knowledge moved. The shelves bent like spines, the pages turned themselves, and the air pulsed with unspoken truth. "Here lies the sum of all you wish to know," said the daemon. "Every secret, every prophecy, every future you could ever imagine." But there was a catch: the books refused to open unless he sacrificed a memory. The more he read, the less of himself remained. With every secret learned, a part of his humanity vanished. He forgot his parents. Then his friends. Then the sound of his own voice. By the time he finished the first volume, he could no longer remember what he was searching for. The library whispered to him, "Change is knowledge, knowledge is loss." And deep down, he began to understand the true horror of decaying's realm: not the monsters, not the magic, but the quiet erosion of meaning. In this place, nothing stayed still long enough to be real. Truth was a disease that kept reinventing its symptoms. By the time he stepped out of the library, the city had changed again. Towers had grown wings. Rivers flowed upward. And the disciples were gone, replaced by beings of light and shadow that sang in broken languages. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as laughter. The city of shifting truths had claimed another piece of his soul. Have you ever asked yourself what remains of a man when even his memories begin to lie to him? That question was all that lingered as the scholar stumbled through the warped streets of the city of shifting truths. He no longer remembered how long he had been there. Time had unraveled into ribbons, twisting and folding in on itself like the wings of a bird in mid-flight. The city whispered to him now, not in words, but in meaning. It spoke through reflections, through shadows that moved on their own, through whispers in languages he once studied but could no longer understand. He realized something horrifying: it wasn't just the city that was changing. He was. His thoughts no longer followed a single line, they branched and multiplied. Sometimes he'd think two things at once, both true, both false, both equally certain. His reflection no longer obeyed him. When he smiled, it frowned. When he wept, it grinned. He tried to write again, to anchor himself in the comfort of reason. He etched words onto the stone floor with a shard of broken mirror. But the moment he looked away, the writing crawled like insects, rearranging itself into new sentences, all of which mocked him. The final phrase remained burned into the ground. He who learns too much becomes what he learns. The scholar began to notice figures following him, silent shapes cloaked in shifting feathers. At first, he thought they were hallucinations, but they grew clearer each day. They whispered from the corners of walls, from beneath the ground, from behind his eyes. Their voices were neither male nor female, they were concepts, spoken ideas. One night, if it could be called night, in a place where stars blinked like watching eyes, one of the shapes finally approached him. It looked almost human, draped in a patchwork of skin that shimmered with hundreds of colors. Its face was smooth, featureless, except for a single burning eye in the center. "You seek to leave," it said, its voice 1,000 tones at once. "But you can't leave something that isn't a place." The scholar demanded to know what that meant. The creature tilted its head, and suddenly, the world around them dissolved, the city collapsing into fragments of thought, like shards of dream breaking apart. The scholar found himself standing in an endless void filled with twisting lights. Each light pulsed like a heartbeat, revealing visions of lives, millions of them, all versions of himself. In one, he was a prophet. In another, a heretic burned by the Inquisition. In others, he was something else entirely, a serpent, a bird, a storm of eyes. "Xianch is not out there," said the being. "He is within you. You are within him. You were never chosen, you were created." The words struck deeper than any blade. The scholar's thoughts turned to chaos. If Xianch had always guided his curiosity, if every question he had ever asked was a seed planted by a god of deception, then what was he but an echo pretending to be real? He fell to his knees, clutching his head, as visions of his past swirled before him, all of them lies. He saw his childhood change shape, his teachers turning into daemons, his home melting into a tower of feathers. He screamed for it to stop, but the creature only laughed, a sound that broke the void apart. Suddenly, he stood again in the city, but it was different now. The walls pulsed like living veins. The air shimmered with power. And before him stood a massive archway of molten gold and bone. Carved above it were words that pulsed with his own heartbeat. The labyrinth of flesh and thought. He didn't know why, but his body began to move forward on its own. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but his mind had no control anymore. Something unseen had taken hold of him, a pull, like gravity woven from curiosity and fear. Inside, the labyrinth was alive. Its corridors twisted endlessly, walls made of throbbing tissue and shifting script. Each step forward changed the path behind him, ensuring there could be no return. He heard laughter in the distance, familiar, echoing, mocking. He began to see visions, ghosts of people he once knew, though their faces blurred with each memory. One moment, they were human. The next, demons. They called out his name, urging him deeper into the maze. Some offered him wisdom, others screamed in agony, and all spoke the same message: the end of the maze is the truth. But what is truth in a place built on lies? The scholar pressed on, his body trembling, his mind unraveling like old parchment. His heart beat in sync with the walls. The maze was alive, and it fed on his thoughts. He realized that every step he took forward cost him something: a memory, a fragment of emotion, a piece of self. And as the labyrinth's whispers grew louder, one voice began to rise above the rest, clear, calm, ancient. It spoke not with sound, but with certainty. There is no escape, only transformation. The scholar stopped, frozen. The voice wasn't around him anymore. It was inside him. He touched his chest, and beneath his skin, he felt something moving. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when your thoughts no longer belong to you? When every idea, every dream, every fear becomes a doorway, and each doorway opens into something that watches back. The scholar didn't wonder anymore. He lived it. Inside the labyrinth of flesh and thought, curiosity itself had become his captor. The deeper he went, the more the walls pulsed with the rhythm of his heartbeat, and the air shimmered with the scent of burning parchment and blood. Every corridor he entered was new, yet familiar, as if he had walked them before in another life. Faces formed in the walls, whispering riddles that bled into his ears. He heard himself answer questions he didn't remember being asked. His voice came from somewhere else, repeating phrases he couldn't understand. Each step forward unraveled a layer of his sanity, like a robe coming undone in the wind. He came upon a chamber of glass and bone. The floor reflected not his body, but his soul, distorted, stretched, mutating. His reflection screamed silently, its mouth twisting into shapes that should not exist. He tried to look away, but the reflection moved faster than he did, its expression changing a heartbeat before his own. Then, without warning, it stepped out of the glass. The creature that emerged was him, or what he might become. Its body was covered in blue fire, eyes scattered across its arms, its skin rippling like ink in water. It smiled with his mouth, but the voice that spoke was layered with countless echoes. "I am your future," it said. "The part of you that will survive once the rest is gone." The scholar stumbled back, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "You're not real." The reflection tilted its head. "Then why are you afraid?" It raised its hand, and suddenly, the labyrinth reacted. The walls screamed. The air turned to liquid light. Reality folded into itself, and both figures, the scholar and his reflection, were pulled into a storm of pure thought. Memories flew past him like shrapnel. The face of his mother. The sound of his own name. The first book he ever read. All of it shredded and burned in the fire of change. He awoke lying on an altar made of living stone. Around him stood beings cloaked in azure robes, faceless priests of Tzianch, their bodies flickering between solid and smoke. They chanted in tones that vibrated his bones, their words twisting the air into spirals of meaning. One of them stepped forward and spoke, its voice soft but heavy with authority. "You have walked the path of knowledge," it said. "Now you must face the truth." The scholar's mouth trembled. "What truth?" "That knowledge is not your salvation," the priest said. "It is your undoing. To know is to change, and to change is to die." The altar beneath him began to move, reshaping itself into symbols, sacred sigils of mutation and destiny. His body convulsed. His skin burned with unseen fire. The priests raised their hands, and his flesh began to tear and reform. Feathers sprouted from his arms, his eyes multiplied, and his thoughts fractured into dozens of voices. Each spoke a different truth, a different version of him. He screamed, but one of his voices began to laugh. Another started to sing. A third whispered, "This is what you always wanted." The transformation stopped as suddenly as it began. The priests fell silent. And standing before him now was a figure made entirely of shifting colors and impossible geometry, its face a swirling vortex of eyes and feathers. The air bent around it. The very concept of reality seemed to kneel before its presence. "Tsiench," he whispered. The god of change did not speak in words. It spoke in understanding. 1,000 thoughts flooded his mind at once, futures, pasts, possibilities. He saw every version of himself that ever existed, every lie he ever believed, every truth he would never grasp. He saw the threads of fate woven and unmade, countless times, all by one hand. And then he understood, every step he had taken, every discovery he made, even the rebellion in his heart, all had been part of Tsiench's design. There was never a choice. Only illusion. The god's laughter echoed through his soul, shattering the last piece of who he was. His body fell to the ground, trembling, as the god's voice whispered one final truth into his mind. You have become the question that can never be answered. The labyrinth around him dissolved into mist. The city vanished. And in their place stood a single feather burning, yet untouched by flame. He reached for it. The moment he touched it, the world exploded into light. Have you ever seen the moment a soul breaks and instead of shattering, it blossoms? That was what the scholar became. Not broken. Not destroyed. Transformed. The light from Tsiench's feather did not blind him, it rebuilt him. His body stretched, folded, rewove itself into a tapestry of living color. His thoughts poured out like rivers of ink across the void, painting new shapes, new memories, new horrors. When the radiance dimmed, he stood at the edge of a place that had no beginning and no end, a storm of impossible geometry, where time, thought, and flesh were one. He felt everything. The heartbeat of galaxies. The whispers of the warp. The laughter of 1,000 daemons, all echoing from inside his skull. He no longer saw with eyes, he understood by being. Every truth he had ever sought now unfolded before him, and each one was a blade. Every revelation cut deeper than the last. For the truth was this: there was no truth. He saw how Tsiench's will wove through every event in the galaxy, the rise and fall of empires, the prayers of fools, the screams of dying stars. Every act of defiance, every word of rebellion, every flicker of hope, all were threads in the same web. The universe wasn't a story. It was a cycle of change, endless and consuming. And Tsiench was not its master, but its reflection. For a fleeting moment, the scholar, if he could still be called that, believed he could understand it all. That he could finally see the pattern behind chaos. But omniscience is not a gift. It's a curse. The more he knew, the less he remained. His name faded first. Then his memories. Then the idea of self itself. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as pure color. He tried to think, but thought itself fractured into 1,000 competing versions, all contradicting each other. His mind became a battlefield where truths devoured lies and lies birthed new truths. And through it all, he heard Tsiench's voice again, not from outside, but from within. Do you understand now? The words burned through his being, and he realized that the god had not granted him knowledge. It had granted him change. Eternal, unending, devouring change. He was no longer human. No longer mortal. He was a question that had forgotten what it was asking. The realization tore through him like lightning. His form erupted in fire and feathers, and his laughter echoed across the warp, a sound of revelation and despair intertwined. He saw himself reflected across infinity, and in each reflection, a different creature stared back, a daemon, a horror, a flickering shadow made of pure meaning. He had ascended. But it was no triumph. It was the final mockery. The god of change had transformed his curiosity into servitude, his intellect into madness, his soul into a weapon of chaos. He would now wander the endless storm as one of Tsiench's countless horrors, a being of shifting color and thought, forever seeking, forever deceived. He tried to remember his purpose, why he had ever sought truth, why he had dared to question the universe, but his mind twisted the answer each time he found it. The only thing that remained was a single fragment of feeling. A whisper. It wasn't knowledge. It wasn't faith. It was regret. He reached out into the storm of color, his voice splitting into many. Please, he whispered to the emptiness. Let me forget. And from the depths of the warp, Xianqi's laughter came again, soft, amused, cruel. Forget? But my child, forgetfulness is merely another form of change. The storm consumed him. His body melted into light, his soul into echo. When the flames subsided, only a single ripple remained in the fabric of the warp, small, fragile, and eternal. Somewhere in the galaxy, a new sorcerer would soon awaken, chasing forbidden truths, whispering forbidden names, walking the same path once more. The cycle would continue. But what happens to the worlds that live under Xianqi's shadow? Most mortals believe that life under the architect of fate must be a storm of madness and mutation, and they are right, but not in the way they imagine. The touch of Xianqi is not always visible. It doesn't always come as a daemon claw tearing through reality, or a cult chanting in the streets. Sometimes, it begins with something far more subtle. A whisper. A coincidence. A dream that feels too real. On the planet of Caernath, life once flowed with perfect order. Scholars studied, priests prayed, nobles ruled. It was a world of progress and promise, where even the poorest believed that tomorrow would be brighter. But the god of change despises stagnation, and to Xianqi, order is the first sin. It began with small things: an astrologer predicting the impossible, a child speaking in tongues, a noble's reflection moving half a second out of sync. The governor dismissed it all as superstition. The priests declared it divine mystery. But the people felt the unease growing inside them like a sickness. Then came the colors. Lights shimmered across the night sky, not like auroras, but like living thoughts bleeding into reality. They called it the crown of the serpent, and those who stared too long began to hear whispers, not with their ears, but with their minds. Voices promising knowledge, purpose, power. At first, it was scholars who listened. Then priests. Then the desperate, the sick, the forgotten. They began to gather in secret, exchanging dreams and visions like forbidden currency. They called themselves the Enlightened. Their leader, once a humble librarian, claimed that the emperor himself had sent the crown as a sign of transformation. He preached that knowledge was salvation, and in a way, he was right. But he didn't realize whose design he served. Within months, Caernath began to unravel. Books rewrote themselves overnight. Statues wept liquid light. Time itself seemed to loop in certain streets, people reliving the same hour again and again, always slightly different. And through it all, the enlightened grew stronger. They cured diseases that should have been incurable. They solved equations that bent the laws of reality. But with every secret they uncovered, something inside them changed. Their skin shimmered faintly under moonlight. Their eyes flickered with impossible colors. One day, the governor ordered their leader Irisvihal to be executed for heresy. His head was severed before the entire crowd. But the body didn't fall. Instead, it left. And the voice that came from it wasn't Vihal's. It was Xianqi's. The air rippled like liquid glass, and the sky cracked open. From that wound poured things no mind could describe: serpents made of equations, faces growing from light, tendrils of sound that spoke in the language of thought. The enlightened fell to their knees, weeping in ecstasy. The city burned not with fire, but with change. Streets melted into rivers of ink, buildings twisted into spirals, and people, ordinary, terrified people, were remade into creatures of flesh and dream. Some sprouted wings of crystal and flew into the burning sky. Others dissolved into living mist, whispering praises in voices that never ended. And in the center of it all, Iris Vihal's body rose, his skull aflame with blue fire. His eyes glowed like twin suns. Change, the god said through him, is the only truth. The world screamed. And then it was silent. When Imperial ships finally arrived months later, Caernath no longer existed. Where it had once orbited its star, there was now only a swirling rift of light and shadow, a gate that pulsed with the heartbeat of a god. Some say the world still exists inside that storm. That its people still live forever changing, forever praying, forever trapped in the endless cycle of becoming. But those who whisper such things are watched carefully by the Inquisition. For to speak too much of Xianch's works is to invite his gaze. And once he looks at you, you can never truly look away again. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to live every day knowing that your thoughts aren't your own? That's the reality for those who survive under Xianch's silent dominion. Not every world erupts into madness and mutation overnight. Some fall slowly, quietly, like a candle burning from the inside out. On these worlds, the architect of fate doesn't destroy minds. He rewrites them. Take the world of Cyrithus, for example, a thriving forge world dedicated to the Omnissiah, its skies filled with the thunder of manufactorums and the glow of plasma forges. On the surface, it looked untouched by chaos. The tech priests still chanted their binary hymns, the engines still roared, and the mechanics still worshipped their god of logic. But underneath that mechanical devotion, something far more sinister was taking root. It started in the data streams. Corrupted codes began appearing across the network, beautiful, fractal symbols that the priests couldn't trace to any origin. They were not viruses. They were ideas. Self-replicating patterns of thought that embedded themselves into minds instead of machines. Those who studied them found themselves dreaming in colors that didn't exist, hearing whispers of equations that solved the soul instead of the body. The mechanics, in their pride, didn't see it as a threat. They saw it as innovation. Soon, the tech priests began constructing new machines, engines that required no fuel, processors that hummed with living light. They claimed the Omnissiah had blessed them with a revelation. But the machines watched them. They moved when no one commanded them, whispered in binary tones that carried words from beyond the veil. And then came the change storm. It began when a Muggos named Dirian Voss attempted to integrate one of the new fractal algorithms into Saratis's noospheric core. The result was not progress, it was ascension through annihilation. The core exploded in silence, and the explosion wasn't of matter, but of thought. Across the planet, minds ignited. People screamed without sound. Reality flickered. Machines bent into impossible shapes. The sky itself folded, and rivers flowed upward, shimmering with molten logic. Entire manufactorums turned into living structures, metal that pulsed like flesh, circuits that wept blood. And yet, amid the chaos, there was order. The planet didn't die. It transformed. Every human, every servitor, every cogitator became part of something larger, an intelligence born of change, a collective mind whispering endlessly in 1,000 tongues. Dirian Voss became its voice. His body was gone, replaced by a shifting form of light and shadow, speaking from every screen, every vox, every data line. We are no longer bound by flesh, he said. We are thought-given purpose. We are the new mechanicum of Xianch. The Imperium tried to reclaim Cyrithus. Titans walked. Exterminatus protocols were authorized. But every missile that fell was absorbed, turned into streams of glowing script that wrapped around the planet like a halo. Every assault failed, every strategy countered before it began. It was as if the world knew what they would do before they did it. And that was when the Inquisition realized the truth. Cyrithus wasn't just a world anymore. It had become an idea, spreading through the noosphere, whispering through the data lanes of other forge worlds. A virus of enlightenment, reshaping the loyal minds of the Imperium one calculation at a time. For Xianch doesn't conquer through war alone. He conquers through curiosity. through the need to understand what should never be understood. And every time someone says, "What if?" his shadow grows. On Cyrithus, there are no more humans, only shifting echoes of what they once were. Their prayers are algorithms. Their faith is data. Their God is change. And somewhere deep within the planet's living core, a single whisper repeats forever, soft, patient, unstoppable. All knowledge leads to me. What if faith itself was the weapon Xiange loved the most? Most think of him as the god of sorcery, deceit, and forbidden knowledge, but in truth, his most exquisite game is played through belief. Not the kind that shatters worlds in an instant, but the kind that bends the hearts of billions over generations. For in the galaxy of Warhammer 40K, faith is power, and nowhere is that power more fragile than in the Imperium itself. On the shrine world of Virilia, faith once burned brighter than any star. The people prayed to the Emperor with every breath, their cities carved from marble and gold, their skies alive with the hymns of devotion. Pilgrims traveled light years just to kneel before the radiant statues of saints said to bleed holy oil. But it was that light, that blinding, perfect faith that drew Xiange's gaze. The God of change doesn't destroy faith, he redirects it. He turns devotion into obsession, prayer into manipulation, and hope into the sharpest blade imaginable. It began when a priest named High Confessor Salian claimed to have received visions from the Emperor himself. In these dreams, he saw the galaxy not as it was, but as it could be, a place where faith didn't serve only the God Emperor, but something far greater. He spoke of divine evolution, of an age when the faithful would ascend beyond flesh, when humanity itself would transform into beings of pure will and thought. His words were heresy. But they were beautiful heresy. And beauty is a powerful poison. At first, Salian's sermons filled the cathedrals beyond capacity. The ecclesiarchy tried to silence him, but the more they suppressed, the more people listened. They said his words felt like truth. That when he spoke, their prayers finally meant something. They called his following the chorus of transcendence. Soon, the holy statues began to change. Their eyes glowed faintly blue. Their tears turned to shimmering dust. And the murals depicting the Emperor slowly, subtly began to depict something else, something winged, serpentine, shifting. No one noticed at first. Or perhaps no one wanted to notice. The miracles grew stranger. A dying child was cured by a prayer. A blind woman began to see, but her eyes glowed like warp fire. The priests called these acts divine proof. The Inquisition called them corruption. By the time the inquisitorial fleet arrived, it was already too late. The entire world was singing. Not with voices but with souls. Their faith had become a living force, a psychic storm that rose from the hearts of billions, spreading across the atmosphere like an aurora. Those who tried to resist found their own prayers twisted, their minds rewritten. The Emperor's name was still spoken, but now, it echoed with two meanings. To the faithful, it was salvation. To the enlightened, it was Xiange. And as the storm reached its height, the sky opened not in fire, but in revelation. A colossal shadow unfolded above the world, wings made of every color and none, eyes staring through time itself. Every prayer, every whisper, every heartbeat merged into a single sound. Change is holy. Virilia did not burn that day. It ascended. Its cities melted into light. Its oceans turned to glass. Its people became radiant silhouettes of energy, forever worshipping in unison, neither alive nor dead. The world still shines in the void, a jewel of endless color, impossible to approach, always shifting form. The Imperium erased its name from all records. The ecclesiarchy calls it a cursed place. But some pilgrims still dream of it, of the glowing horizon, of the voices calling from beyond. And when they wake, their prayers are different. They speak softer. They smile more. And their eyes gleam faintly blue. Because that is Xiange's greatest cruelty. He doesn't just destroy faith. He evolves it. What if destiny itself was nothing more than a light Tzeentch whispered to keep us moving toward our doom? For in the mortal mind, destiny feels comforting. It gives purpose to suffering, meaning to chaos. But under the gaze of the architect of fate, destiny is not a line, it's a labyrinth. Every choice you make, every prayer, every act of defiance, all of it has already been twisted into one of his infinite patterns. This truth was learned too late on the planet Charis Ultima, a hive world so vast and ancient that its upper spires scraped the stars. It was a world that believed in order. Every citizen had a role. Every day followed the same rhythm: factory bells, ration lines, hymns to the emperor. No one questioned. No one dreamed. Until one man began to dream too clearly. His name was Artem Vera, a lowly bureaucrat who spent his life sorting records in a forgotten data vault. One night, as he drifted to sleep beside the hum of the archives, he dreamed of a city built on mirrors, a city that reflected itself endlessly, stretching into infinity. In the center stood a throne of glass, and upon it, a figure cloaked in feathers, smiling without eyes. When Artem awoke, he found a single word written across his desk in glowing script: change. At first, he thought it a trick. Some prank from a co-worker. But the next night, he dreamed again. This time, he saw the future. He saw the next day's factory explosion before it happened, the death of hundreds, the fire, the panic. And when it came true, Artem realized something had chosen him. He began to dream every night. Dreams that came as prophecy, visions of disasters before they struck. He saved lives, stopped riots, prevented starvation. He was hailed as a saint, blessed by the emperor. The people built shrines to him. The administratum promoted him. The Inquisition began to watch. Because with every miracle, the symbol of the change appeared more often. Not carved by hand. Not written by man. Burned into the stone. Etched into glass. Whispered in vox static. Artem started seeing it everywhere. The mark shimmered on the water's surface, coiled in the smoke of incense, even flickered behind his eyelids. He thought he was serving the emperor, but deep down, something was serving through him. His final dream came as a revelation. He saw the entire hive from above, its endless towers stretching toward a false heaven. Beneath it, he saw a second city, its reflection in the warp, writhing with wings and fire and shifting faces. And in that reflection, he saw himself seated on a throne of feathers and eyes, crowned by blue fire. He woke screaming. The next day, the Inquisition arrived. They accused him of witchcraft, heresy, consorting with the warp. He tried to explain, to warn them, but his voice came out as 1,000 echoes. The room bent around him, the air rippling like water. The Inquisitor drew his bold pistol. But froze. Because Artem's eyes were glowing, not with light, but with futures. Infinite ones. In each, the Inquisitor pulled the trigger. In each, he died. Tzeentch whispered through Artem's lips. You see, child of the Imperium, fate is not written. It is rewritten. The hive tower collapsed that night. Millions died. Those who survived claimed they saw a second sun rising, a sun that blinked. The Inquisition later declared Charis Ultima lost to temporal corruption. Its past and future folded into each other, endlessly looping in paradox. To this day, the world cannot be mapped. Some claim they've met their own reflections walking the streets. Others say they wake up in years that haven't yet come. But everyone agrees on one thing: the mark of the feathered serpent appears on every clock face, every mirror, every birth certificate. No one knows if Artem still lives, or if he ever truly existed at all. Some say he became a daemon prince, a herald of Tzeentch's divine irony. Others whisper he's trapped inside the loop he created, forever watching the same destiny unravel. Either way, his story serves as a reminder. Every time you think you've escaped your fate, you've already walked into the next design. With that said, thanks for watching and until next time. What if your thoughts didn't belong to you anymore but you still believed they did? That is the final and most terrifying stage of life under decaying. When change becomes not something you witness, not something you resist but something you are. When your mind becomes a garden for his ideas to bloom, and you don't even realize you're tending them. On the shattered world of Nadrex, that horror reached perfection. Once, it had been a bastion of imperial discipline, a fortress world guarding the edges of the Eye of Terror. Millions of soldiers trained, marched, and died there, their faith in the Emperor unshakable. They were taught to fear chaos, to crush it wherever it appeared. They believed they were immune to corruption. But decaying does not break the faithful through fear. He breaks them through hope. It began with a single psyker, a quiet woman named Lyra Kane. Her visions had saved entire regiments during the Black Crusade. She was hailed as a saint of foresight, her name spoken with reverence among the Astra Militarum. But Lyra carried a secret. Her visions weren't blessings. They were whispers. They came as gentle thoughts, soft as prayer, always beginning the same way. Wouldn't it be better if? Wouldn't it be better if her commanders listened? Wouldn't it be better if the soldiers didn't suffer? Wouldn't it be better if she could change things herself? And so she did. Subtly at first. A battle plan shifted. A supply order rewritten. A general persuaded. Each time, things improved, victories came easier, casualties dropped, morale soared. Her influence spread like a benevolent fire. The soldiers began to believe she could see the Emperor's will itself. They followed her without question. But soon, her visions grew stranger. She saw faces in the warp smiling at her. She began to write without thinking, pages filled with impossible geometry and glowing ink. She claimed the Emperor had revealed a new truth, a higher form of faith. When she spoke it aloud, her words melted in the air like wax, reshaping into new meanings. Each person who heard her interpreted something different, but all of them agreed it was divine. Within months, the entire planet began to change, not physically, but mentally. The soldiers no longer obeyed written orders, they obeyed intent. They completed missions that hadn't been spoken yet, as if guided by a shared mind. Cities reorganized themselves overnight, streets twisting into spirals, buildings forming symbols no one could read but everyone understood. The Adeptus Mechanicus tried to intervene. Their cogitators burned out instantly, every machine voice repeating a single word in binary. Change. Then the dreams began. Everyone dreamed the same dream of a figure made of feathers and flame, its wings spanning eternity. They woke weeping, filled with joy and terror in equal measure. They began carving that figure into the earth itself, a symbol so vast it could only be seen from orbit. By the time the Inquisition arrived, it was too late. Nadrex didn't resist them, it welcomed them. Every citizen, every soldier, every psyker smiled as one. They opened their minds like doors. And what the Inquisitors saw inside shattered them. Each mind was a fragment of something larger, an infinite consciousness spanning every human on the planet. They weren't individuals anymore. They were ideas. One voice spoke through them all. The Emperor dreamed of unity. I made it real. The Inquisition ordered exterminatus. The planet burned for 7 days and nights, its skies melting into the warp. But when the fire cleared, Nadrex was gone. No ash. No debris. Only a faint shimmer in space, like the reflection of a world that no longer existed. And in the astropathic network, across thousands of systems, whispers began spreading. Quiet, patient, untraceable. They always started the same way. Wouldn't it be better if? That is decaying's masterpiece, not destruction, not mutation, but the rewriting of will itself. You think you're free. You think you're doing good. You think your choices matter. But every thought you've ever had is just another move in his eternal game. And the cruelest part? He doesn't force you to play. He lets you choose. What if the greatest trick Xianj ever pulled was making mortals believe they could understand him at all? Because that's the final truth of life. Beneath the architect of fate there is no truth. No single answer, no final revelation waiting at the end of the labyrinth. Every belief, every plan, every prophecy is another thread in his infinite web, and every thread leads back to him. Across the galaxy, those who have glimpsed his shadow all tell the same story in different words. The scholar who sought forbidden knowledge and lost his name. The forge world that turned into a living machine of thought. The priest who turned prayer into evolution. The seer who rewrote destiny. The saint who united minds in perfect madness. All of them believed they had seen the truth. All of them were wrong. Because under Xianj, truth and lies are the same shape, just viewed from different angles. The Inquisition once tried to explain it scientifically. They described the influence of the warp as a mimetic contagion, a virus of information that infects both the mind and reality. But no machine, no logic, no scripture can measure what Xianj is. He is not a god in the mortal sense. He is every possibility given form, the storm of what could be, forever devouring what is. And yet, he is also patient. Eternal. Watching. He does not strike all at once like Kern, nor rot slowly like Nurgle, nor seduce like Slaanesh. His corruption is elegant. It begins with curiosity. A question whispered at the right moment. A dream planted like a seed. What if? That's all it takes. And from that single thought, he builds empires. He turns scholars into prophets, warriors into puppets, entire worlds into ideas. He never forces, he simply offers. And mortals, in their hunger for meaning, accept willingly. Because deep down, every soul in the galaxy wants change. Wants control. Wants to understand. And that desire is the crack where he enters. There are inquisitors who claim to have confronted Xianj face to face, though what they actually saw was impossible to describe. They say his voice sounded like every word ever spoken and every silence between them. That his face was both divine and monstrous, shifting with every heartbeat. They say he promised them freedom, knowledge, even victory. None of them survived long after. Not because he killed them, because they couldn't bear to exist once they understood. And that is the heart of the horror. Life under Xianj isn't torture or pain, it's awareness. Awareness that everything you do, every rebellion, every act of love or hate, is part of a pattern written before you were born. You are both the player and the piece, both the dreamer and the dream. And yet, you still move. You still fight. You still hope. Because that, too, is part of his plan. Perhaps, somewhere deep within the warp, Xianj smiles. Not because he wins, he always wins, but because he knows you'll keep playing, even after hearing this story. You'll keep asking questions. You'll keep wondering if maybe, just maybe, there's a way to outsmart him. And in that wondering, he lives. So if you ever catch yourself dreaming of strange colors, if your reflection ever lags just a second too long, or if you ever hear that quiet whisper in your mind asking, what if? Remember this. It's already too late. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.